Good evening. My name is Roseanne Santos. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement, and welcome to Growing Trends in Cybersecurity. I am so excited to be here today, and I am so proud of tonight's virtual alumni reunion. We have never done anything like this before, and I have to admit, I'm excited and nervous all at the same time. We have raised over $26,000, and we have over 450 people registered for this evening's events. And I mean, it's amazing. I didn't know this was possible, and I'm so very happy to be here. I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, CASO Document Management, and their generous donation for helping us make this panel discussion possible. Founded in 1994, CASO redefines productivity with document scanning services, book scanning, workflow automation software, and enterprise content management solutions. And what is so much more exciting is that the CEO and owner of CASO is class of 2002 alumna, Ms. Lana Bailey Tomorrow. Thank you to CASO and Lana for sponsoring tonight's panel on growing trends in cybersecurity. I also want to take a moment to thank and acknowledge our panelists, our moderator, and all of you in our audience who have supported Alumni Reunion with your generous donations. For those who haven't yet donated but would like to, you can click the link in the chat. After the panel discussion is over, our virtual networking event will follow. And we will also put a link in the chat in the last 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes of the panel discussion. No reunion is complete without networking, even if it is virtual. If any of you want to be in a breakout room with one of our panelists, please wait until you've been thrown into a breakout room and then just send us a little message in the main room and we'll switch you out. It just makes the flow a little easier. I know it seems a bit much to ask you to do that, but technology is ever changing around here, and we're also learning with it. So without further ado, I want to introduce our moderator this evening, John Mcfarland. John is an intelligence analyst for New York Cyber Command, and he received his Master of Science in Digital Forensics and Cybersecurity in 2019, along with the Advanced Certificate in Terrorism Studies. I now am proud to hand over the virtual mic to Mr. John Mcfarland. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. So before we get started, I want to flag the work of a fellow alumni, Douglas Smith, who is working on the Tech Talent Pipeline being run through John Jay. The Tech Talent Pipeline helps move students into internship positions with companies and agencies throughout the city. So Doug, good job, and I just wanted to flag that. Our fellow panelists today are Dr. Helen Marie Maris. She's the director of the Center for Cybercrime Studies. She is also an associate professor in the Department of Security, Fire, and Emergency Management at John Jay. Dr. Maris serves as a subject matter expert on cybercrime for the UN Office of Drug and Crime. And prior to her academic post, she served as in the US Navy as a law enforcement specialist and command investigator. Joining her is Dr. Adam Scott Want, assistant professor at John Jay College and the lead cyber instructor for the Association of Inspectors General. He regularly briefs and consults the Department of Defense and US federal agencies. Joining them is Dr. Andre Cahill. He's the CEO and founder of LifeArs. He's a former lecturer at the FBI Training Academy and former Chief Information Security Officer at IDT 911. Professor Morris and Want are the current recipients of a large research grant from the US Department of Justice to combat sales of fentanyl on the darknet drug markets. Guys, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So the first question today is, I think, an important one. The media largely focuses on nation-state cyber attacks, but the majority of cybercrime is done by cyber criminal groups. Why do you think this misunderstanding is perpetuated, and what can people do to ensure that they have a more accurate understanding of the threat landscape? And I'll leave that on the open floor for whoever wants to answer.
Mary, I think you should be so privileged to pick up the first one.
Oh, me? You're volunteering me? So I think in true fashion, I'll be the first one to take a crack at this. I think that one of the issues is that the concept of cybercrime is largely misunderstood. We've seen coverage of cybercrime focused not only on nation state actors, but using the wrong terminology. And I think it's extremely important to understand that cybercrime is quite extensive. Individuals can engage in it. We've seen groups that engage in organized forms of cybercrime, but we've also seen nation state actors. The issue with discussing nation state actors, the greatest threat, is that, as we all know within this field, data about cybercrime is quite sparse. So it's hard to make these large scale claims to determine, which threat is the most significant. Largely, we base these threat assessments, if you will, that are made public and are distributed by the media based on private companies' assessments, and particularly cybersecurity companies' assessments. The US and other countries all over the world have an issue with collecting cybercrime data because we don't have official crime measurement tools that can really provide a comprehensive picture of not only cyber-dependent crime, hacking, distributed denial of service attacks, malware distribution, but also cyber-enabled crime, those traditional crimes that are facilitated online. Adam, do you want to add something?
Yeah, let me add. There's definitely a difficulty in distinguishing between what is a nation state actor and what is not. I think if you look outside, even in the US, I mean, all over the world, there are a lot of hacking groups and criminal organizations in different parts of the world that receive resources from the government, from their nation state, that receives training, and that receives leeway in lack of prosecution for when they go after the enemies of their nation state. And I don't want to call out any countries specifically, but we certainly see that with many of the enemies, sort of say, of the United States, where whether they're a nation state actor or not is very much so a blurred line. There's no doubt that the US and other nation states have official government parts of official government agencies that specialize in advanced penetration of foreign governments and foreign networks. But sometimes it's hard to tell who the nation state actor is and who's not.
So I think that that's an excellent point. And I'm sorry, Andre, if I'm jumping in again, but I think it's interesting for us to look at the issue of proxies, right? And the use of proxies by various nations. And I think the issue that Adam was touching upon was the problem that we have with legal and technical attribution to make this determination, because there are different sets of proxy actors. We have those that have some form of direct connection, and then others that are so far removed that it's quite difficult to attribute specific incidents to particular nations. And Andre, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this as well.
So our company is behind 6 Department of Justice indictments with the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Secret Service. The latest involved group called Lazarus from North Korea for cryptocurrency hacking. And they started with the 2017 with a company called NiceHedge. And you can Google the whole story. 3 months, our whole network disappeared. I disappeared too out of the internet, right? So you're playing with a really deadly cobras on a market if you are against the nation state threat actors. The threat actors from nation state, they have a clear mission and vision. Is it a very destructive? You look at the Russia. General Koropko from GRU said that his goal is to make every American digitally naked and dying 4 times a year, meaning stealing his identity. But that's a very clear mission and vision, right, of Russians. You look at the Koreans, and they are all about funding through cryptocurrency hacking, through various momentum, around 2 billion right now, funding their operations, right? Very, very different momentum. You look at the other countries, like, for example, China, that's intellectual property game. We had APT 41, APT 10 indictment with the Department of Justice. So you can read exactly what happened in those cases. The cyber criminal rings are heavy right now in 2 types of engagements: cyber extortion and business email compromise. If you look at the FBI statistic, There's there are two crimes that 90% is probably going to happen. I have a good news for you, all of you. You all are part of it. You have $500, you can be extorted tomorrow. It's just the way it works. And don't make a mistake. It's everyone's going to get something. We live in an era that life is a breach. You're all going to get hacked. I'm waking up every morning and thinking, is my system hacked? Is my computer compromised? Just the way it is. The same way you get the call to maybe you never know what you're going to get or who is your relative who's going to have cancer. It's just the way it is. This is the nature of what we are living in. This is a society we are living in. The cyber criminals right now in cyber extortion space, I would say interesting momentum happened with the Elon Musk and Tesla. You have a groups like Ryuk and Maze that retire and said, Elon Musk, thank you for dropping the Bitcoin because from 50 million, we have a 350 million. At a 350 million, we're just going to cash out and leave, right? Like we don't need to do cybercrime anymore, right? Thank you, Elon, for bumping the Bitcoin up. And then you have a group like Everest or Networker who said, Elon Musk, thank you for funding, right? We have a 5 million group. Now we have a 50 million. We're actually recruiting all around the globe. And we're going to do more ransomware. Thank you for funding us. So their mission and vision is very clear. Cyber criminals are saying that, look, we're not touchable. There is prosecution is below 10%. There's lack of cooperation, what Adam and Mary alluded here to. And if you look at the case we've done with the Lazarus from 2017 to 2021, 4 years to serve indictment, 4 years, right? Because you have no evidence, you can't seize any evidence. And with a 99.9%, you have to make an attribution. You think that's easy?
So to that point, where the law enforcement agencies are unable to seize evidence and really do their due diligence to protect citizens, what can citizens do to make themselves more knowledgeable and really take preventative action to prevent themselves and to make sure that they have good cyber hygiene?
I think reading is one of the most important things a citizen could do. Reading things like the Wall Street Journal, reading different technical magazines, Tech Bites, watching, reliable media on YouTube or online that talks about how to provide basic protection. Part of the problem we see with cyber is the rules are constantly changing. It's in a constant change of flux. So if I were to train somebody to know how to protect themselves 110%, a couple of months later, they're going to be down to 90%, then 80%, then 70%. I don't use textbooks in most of my classes because by the time they're published, they're already out of date, out of print. So I think the ability to ask the right questions and read the correct current literature are things that are quite important for anybody, any citizen in the United States to be able to learn. Marie, what's your background?
So, I know that it's a cliche because you have two academics that are just going to talk about education, but it's true. Education is key in this area. And it's not just education of the average citizen. Andre brought up the point of a lack of cooperation. We generally have a deficit in national capacity for critical cybersecurity jobs, right? Which run the gamut from policy, legal, to those who have more of the technical skills that are needed. So this education is critical. We also need to change the way that we do things, honestly, in order to build this capacity. It's almost nonsensical today that we have specialized units that are dealing with technology because it's so pervasive. So when you have one unit that analyzes data, of course, you're not going to have the evidence that you need, right? Because you have one unit that's overworked, that's dealing with all of the technology that's being used, not only for cyber crimes, but also for traditional crimes as well. So we really have to change the way in which we're approaching this issue if we want to deal with the deficit, because that also feeds into international cooperation. Plus the need to actually work on diplomatic relations, working on other countries. Because, one of the things that we forget, we take a Western perspective to everything that we're looking at, but many times the actors that we're investigating are located in countries that don't have the resources that the United States has and other Western countries have. So we need to figure out ways to assist these nations to help them, because they don't have the same financial, technical, and the same expertise that's needed. So this requires really a multifaceted approach. And Andre, since you've been working in this field, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
I think there's only one certainty, one constant in our life, that's change. Mm-hmm. We always have to adapt, and I agree with you, Marie and Adam. I tell you, when I finish the school, I hope I'm not going to go back to school. When I decided to actually be part of an intelligence agency, so I thought my academia is maybe over, and actually went back right into academia and more into cryptography and doing most of the crypto breaking type of work, which means I heavily actually work with the people who had a science and science background. And I agree with you. It's like, we always have to think, what is that adaptation for all of us to stay away or keep those criminals a little bit further away? Sure, you can't keep nation states. Let's not be naive. It's almost like you have 2 jets flying over your house with the 2 Tomahawk missiles. I mean, who's going to help you, right? There's no enterprise set up. I mean, you better call the Department of Homeland Security for a backup, right? Like the police department is not going to help you with this. That's a different issue. If that's your enemy, that's a very different issue. By the way, feel privileged if they're chasing you, right? There have to be a very good reason they're chasing you and not someone else. But education, it is very, like, awareness is very important. Unfortunately, I did call my doctor and he told me there is no patch to DNA. They can't patch my DNA. So there's always deficit in what we can learn and capacity that we can do. And I also like one of these 17 years old individuals out of the Vietnam that we were tracking for years. And he said, do you guys like the code? I said, yeah, everyone likes the code. He said, do you like the Da Vinci the code? I said, yeah, we all like Da Vinci the code. But like, it's a pretty good book, right? And he said, look, you're only good as your code. Mm-hmm. What he meant are two elements. That piece of software that's written as a piece of code, mm-hmm. and the human talent engineering that created the code. And those are 2 important pieces. As far as I can tell, there are no robots right now creating the code. People create a code. People have flaws, code has flaws, right? If you create awareness from professionals to students, to the houses, to everyone, and especially professionals, because we have a lot of bad code out there that threat actors are exploiting. And we create a better assurance process and better awareness from people who are really professionals in the market to individuals who are just normal citizens. And I also told everyone that, look, if you're a normal citizen, how far do you really need to go? Look, don't get paranoid. This is no different than you go to the doctor every year for some kind of checkup. Like, life is changing for you too, buddy. You had an accountant, you had a doctor, you have a cyber therapist now, okay? And you go to him twice a year and you talk to him about your cyber issues. This is what you should do. You should really have a cyber therapist. You're going to talk to him about how your computer is rebooting itself, how your phone is not working, right? And then he can give you some suggestions. Look, there are now cyber pills, but there are some opinions about why that is happening, okay? So you go for these therapy sessions. They're really good. They're still not that costly, and twice a year, and I think you're going to be fine.
Andre, you have just answered one of the biggest mysteries in my life. I have accidentally become a lot of people's cyber therapist, and I got to figure out a way to charge them per hour. You know, you have no idea how right you are on that issue. John, could I answer a quick question from the question and answers?
Sure, but just before you do that, Andre, I think you just upset every student who serves as the IT person for their family, because now they're going to be looked to even more. And yeah, Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, a really good question came over and I can answer it very quickly.
Sure.
Is cryptocurrency crime a growing field? And the answer is absolutely and exponential. It's growing in at least 3 different areas. Area 1 is crypto crime and how it's used to support illegal activity or finance terrorism. Number 2 would be the hacking of crypto accounts and the stealing of crypto currency. And then number 3 would be fraudulent crypto companies and cryptocurrencies that are created simply to steal money from people. So I think it's a giant area for people.
It is. I'd like to add for the last one, what's really interesting is we've started to see Ponzi schemes. Big Club is a good example of that within this space because of this buy-in now that exists with different cryptocurrencies and the fact that the public seeks to purchase them. So it's quite interesting. It's an interesting space. We've also seen crypto jacking, which is basically what you were talking about as well. And there are lots of not new ways, but variations that we've seen. And it's basically cyber criminals exploiting something that's considered new and now and interesting and of use to individuals. Not surprising for security professionals who are following this space, because this is what cyber criminals do. The biggest issue that we're faced with is that we're one step behind these types of incidents. And this is one of the reasons why we need to do better within the space of building our cybersecurity capacities nationally and internationally to be able to keep up pace with cyber criminals.
You know, I would add to that also, and this is a great segue into the next question I had, the way that cryptocurrency has enabled ransomware and the ability to pay out to ransomware. And on the subject of change that you had recently discussed in the last question, ransomware has seen one of the biggest changes from its inception. It started as a largely destructive ransom attack and has become a full-on campaign to extort. You now steal the data, you lock it, you ransom it, and then if they don't pay more, you extort it. How should law enforcement change to meet that threat?
I can tell you, but based on investigation we've done, tracing Bitcoin was not as hard. I would say like a year ago, 95% of wallets out there actually would be attributed. Now, the new groups are very more sophisticated and aware of law enforcement techniques, getting too close to the individuals. So they know how to work with their wallets, how to set up their emails on Protoman and various other platforms that basically escape the route that we've been using in a time to make the attribution to the Bitcoin. Like Monero, for example, was much harder to actually trace. Some of the cryptocurrencies were much harder to trace. And also, if you look at the transactions, any high transaction, high velocity, that's a criminal group. And sure, right now we have these trading accounts that go from various trading platforms. But if you see something in a blockchain that's not attributed, that's not the wallet that actually has been from any of these large trading platforms, then you pretty much know that right away that high velocity, high volume of the transactions is basically a criminal ring moving money for whatever reasons they need to move the money. It's just the way it is. And most of the transactions are actually very small in a blockchain in a day. If you look into it, they're very small. So these larger transactions is what I would say most of the blockchain analysis is looking into it. When we got into first time looking at the Lazarus, and we actually attributed, and you can download the paper from us, we attributed Lazarus to 5 or 6 Bitcoin wallets. You can see actual money coming in to Lazarus group, which is a nation state group out of Korea, right? As insane as it sounds, you can see money coming in and out of North Korean military, which I think it's kind of impressive story to plot picture over 2 years, see how the military funded itself with the $2 billion stolen money.
I think, you know, it's interesting to look at attribution in that space, right? Especially with Lazarus Group, because you have a lot of actors who might try to masquerade themselves as Lazarus Group, emulate that behavior to end up with that money themselves. And so as law enforcement moves forward and tries to attribute this to them and then go after them to prosecute them for crimes, they're going to need to evolve with that. Dr. Maris, Dr. Want, do you have any response to that?
I have faith that law enforcement across the board are moving forward to be able to deal with modern threats. And it's not just cryptocurrency, it's all different types of modern threats. I mean, yeah, policing, up until recently, I would say that most policing was standard, traditional, protecting people against physical threats and violence. However, what we're seeing across the country right now at both a local, state, and federal level are specific dedicated units that are dealing with high technology crime, that are making the connections needed to be done, and they're doing a pretty good job of it. Now, yes, there will always be organized crime groups all over the world that are trying to find the latest ways to steal and to commit fraud. And yes, we will always need to catch up as people create new types of frauds and new types of crimes. However, I think that government is finally, within the past few years, being able to wrap their mind around the fact that crime happens electronically, just as common or just as dangerously as it happens physically. And I think, in a prior conversation, John, I pointed out to you that your agency, New York City Cyber Command, is a prime example of that. Your agency was created to elevate the role of cybersecurity within New York City government. And it was a role that was held by New York City Information Technology, the Department of Information Technology, intersecting with the NYPD. And then Cyber Command came about to be able to gather intelligence, analyze threat, respond to incidents. So your own agency, along with many other units that have been started around the country, are prime examples of the fact that government's no longer sitting back and waiting to see what happens next.
So I have just an addition. I think that while all of those, the agencies that have been developed, the specialized units are a good step in the right direction. I have to say that it isn't enough if we're looking at, and I know that all of you are familiar with my, at least the panelists of my perspectives here. I think that in order to really deal with the cybercrime threats that we have today, the police academy curricula has to change. And there has to be information about technology and basics of digital forensics, because irrespective of what crime we're looking at, there's some technology that is being adopted, and segmenting this cybercrime in one unit is not doing enough, especially when we've seen technology being used by organized criminal groups, by traffickers, and the research that Adam and I have been doing have really driven that lesson home, that technology has been adopted by a wide variety of illicit actors, and we're seeing these platforms being used. So when you have these single units that are focusing on them, there's no way that they're able to deal with the threats that we're identifying online. And just a point to go back to the ransomware discussion, I think that we need to highlight that while we've seen ransomware evolve, and of course it's going to evolve because it's based on expected utility, right? So the more people pay out, the more likely we're going to see these types of cyber crimes proliferate. And this is what we've seen, right? We've started to see from a few $100, the equivalent of Bitcoins, to tens of thousands of dollars, right? Depending on which organization they target. What we can do is talk to businesses, talk to individuals, and make sure that they have their basic cybersecurity measures implemented, that they have redundancy features, that they back up their information. So if something like this does happen, it won't have a catastrophic outcome, and especially with respect to corporations, right? Who can't afford to be offline. And of course, what we've seen in different places of the world with hospitals, right? When their systems were taking offline and patients had to be rerouted. Germany was a case where there was a woman who had to be rerouted, and she had a serious condition and she didn't survive, right, by the time she went to the next hospital. So these are the things that we should really be stressing while we're trying to keep up pace with these cyber criminals and have our law enforcement and other agencies try to determine their method of operation and who these actors are.
I think that's a great answer. We are running out of time, so I'm going to get in one more question before I move it over to Q&A. And this one is for Dr. Crahall. What technologies do new students, or should new students try to learn? Or what skills should they try to learn as they try to break their way into the field?
One of the most growing area is managed security system providers. And I would say that even in the US right now, we have over 5,000 companies with a revenue over $100 million that actually do manage cybersecurity. And in the industry, there's a belief that a hybrid model, when you have someone inside of the enterprise and company that's helping with a level of a skill set that cannot be literally internally placed because of the budget and cost issues, it's much easier to outsource the skill set to manage system level provider who can, for example, do 8 different type of a skill set at a price of 1 professional. So for students, I can tell you, you want to do an entry-level job right now and you want to find something, do what they call SOC analyst, right? And the SOC analyst is a combination of incident response, cybersecurity, a little bit of incident response, a little bit of forensics. So it's a mixture of a little bit of everything, but it's one of the best entry-level jobs right now. If you can get ready, you can actually get. It can be a really great career. Then you can profile yourself. Do you want to do more penetration testing? You would like to move to a GRC and compliance space, or you want to stay in incident response? You want to become a cybersecurity professional who actually integrates all these products at a company? The path is open. It's one of the best ways to actually get in right now into the market if you're a student graduating and you're looking for a placement.
Very cool. And very quickly, Dr. Want and Dr. Maris, if you two have anything to add there.
I mean, I have, I would say emerging technologies. I would say artificial intelligence. I would tell students and individuals within this space to start learning about the Internet of Things, data that can be extracted from these devices, how this data is introduced in court, because it increasingly is. Anything from medical device data to fitness data to devices from the home. Adam, I don't know if you have something to add.
No, I said it already, but let me rephrase it and just repeat it a little bit. Learn how to understand the basics, then ask the right questions, and then research the correct answers. One of the biggest downsides to living in 2020 or 2021, there's a lot of false information out there. There's a ton of false information out there. Our internet, our society, our social media is flooded with horrible false information. And I think one of the biggest skills that a student or an alumni could learn is information discrimination tactics, where they're able to evaluate what is good information and what is poor information, and be able to act upon it after asking the right questions. That's just my 2 cents on that.
Cool. I'm going to move it over to Q&A now, and I'm going to go from the top. I see that you've answered some questions already.
Yeah, I kind of answered some of the easier ones I didn't think we were going to spend time on. Sorry if I shouldn't have done that.
No, it's okay. I hope everybody can see the answers to that. I don't know with the attendance viewership. Okay.
They could.
So I'm going to go in order, and just very quickly, because I only have 3 or 4 minutes before I have to hand it back. Mm-hmm. In the panelists' opinion, will software security solutions ever be able to stop the majority of cybercrime attacks? And this is from Paul Zakus. I hope I pronounced it right. I'm sorry if I didn't.
So I think that's easy. The answer is no. I don't think anyone would argue with that. People's brains work too quickly. They come up with new techniques. Even when we use artificial intelligence, they'll be using artificial intelligence back. So it's just a very hard no, but software does do some work.
Yeah, so basically what we're doing is slowing down perpetrators. But, prevention is while we see prevention attached to some of these solutions, what we're really trying to do is slow down perpetrators and mitigate, right? So lessen the impact once specific incidents occur, but that's really what our cybersecurity solutions can provide.
Look, I mean, we live in an era where every company that's larger has 40 security solutions deployed on premise that all told them or promised them they're never going to be hacked, right? If cell phone operators work like these companies, you could not make a phone call, okay? Because they can't even agree how they're going to talk to each other. And you basically, all we'll be playing right now is a defense with every software. There are only a few agencies that can really play offensive game. Security is a very defensive field. You just try to constantly defend yourself. And so how the company can play offense? And I think the answer is like probably only government can. So get used to it, right? Like in a school, get used to it. Life is not fair.
And, I would add to that too, just a small caveat. Don't think of attacks as binary, right? They're not an attack or not an attack. An attack is a series of steps. And so the goal isn't always just to stop the attack, but to stop the attack as early as possible before it's done much damage.
So John, I just want to add something because I think it's important. We haven't touched on this, but You know, we need to start having these larger conversations of what makes individuals vulnerable, because this is something that the US has not done, and in the form of data protection and talking about data brokers who are consolidating our information and putting us at risk for these large scale attacks. And I think that is definitely a conversation that we need to continue, because it is society that's going to help change that, right? If we're waiting for a law to be passed without society requesting it and creating a mass movement demanding that we have data protection and privacy, we're not going to see change in this space.
Very cool. I agree completely. You need public appeal and public motivation.
Yeah.
Last question before I have to hand it back from Sebastian. With laws being severely behind in the space of technology, does that give law enforcement more space to investigate? And if laws catch up to that technology, will that hinder law enforcement?
So I'll take this as an attorney. I think this is a fairly straightforward answer for me. We have a constant stream of legislation and court cases from like the US Supreme Court and other appellate divisions that are constantly redefining and reining in law enforcement and what they could do. Yes, for a while it was like the wild, wild west when it came to things like computers and forensics and cell phones. But we see a constant stream of decisions from the US federal government, from the Supreme Court, different regulations. You know, Riley versus California was a massive one, and we could just shoot off 5 or 6 different major Supreme Court cases. But we see them being reined in, and we see new protocols being invented, and we try to keep new technologies in line with our constitutional values. It just takes some time to do that.
So I just like to add, I think that it's important for us to have laws and rules in place, because we can ensure that investigations have a good outcome, right? It's not just about procedural justice on whether the rules were followed, but we need to make sure that a good decision, a good outcome comes from this, right? And a good outcome is one that is brought about by respecting the rule of law and human rights. So we need to stress that. So these laws are long overdue, and the interpretation of these laws is long overdue within this space.
And I just add into that, it's great to have laws, but you also have tech companies and everyone makes its own decision in technology. You can see, for example, what happened in Apple case. They decided that all encryption is going to be at the user level, right? And that sends a messaging to, for example, child predators. Now, every child predator uses Apple technology. Why? Because police cannot unlock it. And you have a privacy advocate who said, this is a really great idea, as long as it's not your child on that phone, I guess.
I think it's going to be an interesting thing to watch unfold as we move forward and everybody becomes a little bit more cyber aware. I just want to say again, thank you for the panelists for being here. Please answer some of those questions in the Q&A if you have a chance to, if you think that they need to be answered. Roseanne, I don't actually know how to pass Spotlight back.
That's okay. You guys can stay spotlit because you are amazing and we are here because of your expertise. I'll stay in my little top corner here. I'm okay with that. First of all, please help me put your little clapping emojis up or whatever we do nowadays. Thank you to our moderator, John Mcfarland, our panelists, Professor Want, Professor Morris, and Dr. Cahill for the time and expertise. I am forever grateful. And thank you to our audience for being here. I know that this topic will continue to come up, so please make sure that you're following John Jay College Alumni Relations on LinkedIn, because this is probably my 4th cybersecurity panel in this academic year. So I'm having at least 2 a semester, and we welcome you to come back for future conversations. In the chat, we are going to put the link to the virtual networking event. And hopefully I will see you all at Reunion 22, which I pray will be live, because I think Reunion is just better that way. But this was the next best thing, and you guys really all made it wonderful for me. So thank you so much for saying yes to my email and my LinkedIn stalking, for being on this panel. I really, really appreciate it. And please join us in the networking session. You can continue these conversations there with our panelists. Have a wonderful evening.